Okay, this is a just a little something regarding older stamps. So what's the matter? You yellow or something? That's Dick Powell, whose movies I love. He was a
Hmm.
great child star, and he moved into adulthood in Hollywood. And it's hard to transition from kid star to adult movie star, but he did it pretty successfully and with a great deal of self-deprecation. So I got the title from him. This is about stamps in the early days that were printed yellow on white, which I find to be very problematic. The methodology here was arbitrary. There is a group called the First Issues Collectors Club, and they have a list of what they consider the first postage stamp issue by countries or entities or colonies or what have you, chronologically. And rather than overwhelm myself with how many countries are there, 289 or something like that, I just use this list to pluck out entities that issued stamps between 1840 and 1859. Now, some of the examples will be later, but to make it into this presentation, the entity had to have issued a stamp between in the 1840s and the 1850s. The first one I'll talk about is Austria 1850, so that's quite early. And the thesis here is, I think, manifest. I can read very clearly all four stamps on the right, but the yellow one, you'd have to tell me what that is. I think it's very difficult to read because it's printed in yellow.
I can just barely make out Kreutzer at the bottom, but the top is almost, you know, even though you can see most of it under the cancellation, you can't make out the letters.
And the image or anything. I'm sorry,
Right.
I do have a better copy of this stamp, but I couldn't locate it for
Hmm.
as usual
Yeah, the
for
printing
this
looks a little
present.
blotchy too, a little smeared, a little heavily inked.
Well, that's part of the problem, Phil. I just because it's yellow, I think it's hard to discern it. Well, in any case, uh, this is the gist of my presentation right there. But the other stamps are rather handsome and rather well printed for 1850. This is Austria's second design, and they repeated the color scheme. Austria at this time, Vienna in particular, was a real world capital with great philosophers and writers, and of course, above all, musicians. The memory of Mozart and Beethoven was still very strong, and you had such people as Brahms and the Strauss family still composing. But so it really was a creative place. But the Austrian bureaucracy, I would say, had a different point of view on the world, and it's represented time and again in operettas and so on. The bureaucracy's attitude toward life seemed to be, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if it is broke, we can live with it. So they just printed yellow again. And I repeat my contention. It's an awfully hard thing to discern. The other ones are okay. Well, the green one is very faint. Maybe that's a faded copy. I don't know.
But again, the yellow looks blotchy, like it was poorly printed, over inked or something.
That may well be the case that there's a quality to the yellow ink that they were using. I really don't know.
Huh.
But, well,
You know,
on,
one of the reasons for printing sets of definitive stamps in different colors is that the postal workers would immediately recognize the denomination from the color. They would know what to look for, and they wouldn't have to read it. And you notice that the low value in both cases is the yellow. What is that, 1 or 2 or something?
I don't know what
Kreutzer?
it is. It's probably a one.
No,
Yeah.
here it's two. It's two. It's two here.
Is it?
Okay, 2. Um,
And
but
the design is different. You'll see that the value in the center there at the bottom on the higher value stamps is white, surrounded by the color, whereas on the yellow stamp, the value is in yellow and it's surrounded by white. Different, slightly different design.
That's a good point. And Alan's point also, I was going to make later. They did seem to use yellow on the lowest value, almost as though, well, it doesn't really matter. This is just a periodical and we're sending out 43,000 of them. So I don't know. I really don't know. Going over to Lombardy Venezia, which of course issued its stamps at the time under the aegis of Austria, they did the same thing. Now, that's a rather poor copy of the yellow stamp there, but they shared the same philosophy. Undoubtedly, it was printed in Vienna by the same printing office.
How can you tell this is Lombardy Venetia? There's no.
The denomination is cent rather than Kreutzer. This is Lombardy Venetia's second issue. Once again, as Alan pointed out, yellow for the lowest one. This one is a bit more distinguishable, I find, but anyhow, there you have it. Now the currency is now soldi, which just means money, actually. Norway makes the list because they did issue stamps early on. And once again, they used yellow, as Alan pointed out, for the lowest value. The other ones are easier to read. This one is a little bit better. And I speculate that's because it's tending toward a bit of orange, or am I imagining that?
Yeah, that I wouldn't call that pure yellow.
Well, Phil, I looked in the catalog, it's listed as a yellow stamp, and then there's some ABCs with orangish and so on. So what do I have here? I really don't know, but it's just part of my thesis.
It looks so French. Was Norwegian postage influenced by France?
This medallion design with cross-hatching or lines in the back appears on French stamps, Greek stamps, Romanian stamps. It's particularly with these little, what do they call them, pearls around the circle. It just seemed to be a design that worked, and I think it does work very well. Look at the 8 skilling. That is a nice stamp, and it's obvious what it is for. The design is clear, and there's nothing really extra on there. But we are in the 19th century, so we're going to get some design. And as I speculate, they put a lot of the design details in there to try to foil counterfeiters, but perhaps that's mere speculation. I don't know.
Also, the square frame is also very similar as well to other issues.
This is another yellow stamp. Portugal makes this list because it did issue earlier stamps, none in yellow. This, I believe, is, although it's a reprint, it is the first yellow on white that they used. Oh, by the way, I've seen stamps printed in yellow on brownish and tan paper, and they're much easier to read. But yellow on white just seems to be problematic, as I repeat myself. Finland first did its stamp in this color in around 1910, but eventually they moved to a few yellow stamps as well. Didn't work out too bad in this one, it seems. Going to another continent, Western Australia, that's a little bit clearer perhaps, but maybe because it's a larger stamp, or maybe it's just a larger image. I did this a while ago and I don't remember. When you get to longer sets, I think the people, the printers and the authorities just threw their hands up and said, as Alan pointed, we need some different colors here. We're getting confused. But you'll see that in this, and the 2 missing stamps are not yellow. You'll see here that many of these, for instance, the purplish, pinkish, the bluish, they are repeated, but they used the yellow, but they only used one. I think that is reflecting the problem with printing in yellow on white. So wrapping up here now, maybe when the UPU decided to recommend what color should be used on stamps, they did not consider yellow. They went rather with green, red, and blue, which present no problem, I think. And finally, printing in yellow has caused problems in the 20th century too. Maybe some of you know which US stamp I'm hinting at here.
Commerce calls.
Mm.
Here it comes, Phil. I do not think that era would have gotten through had that background color been anything but yellow.